Welcome, welcome, welcome to this edition of SAGIONIC 1027. We are so glad that you decided to join us today. And with us, I have another one of those guests that are like, um, today we have with us Brittinie Love. And before I share a little bit more about her and we dig into our interview, I want to share a little bit about Sagionic, okay? So the word Sagionic all by itself means carriers of wisdom. Oh, no, movement by movement in human time. Sagionic means movement by movement in human time, whereas the word Sagion by itself means carriers of wisdom. So our
Mm,
desire at Sagionic 1027 is to interview minds and the wisdom insight that is inside of them.
mm.
And so, with that, we have a clearly gorgeous entrepreneur, Brittinie Love, who is going to share with us about her journey in developing um, her own business with
Yeah.
cooking. It's cooking with love. So,
Hmm.
Brittinie, we're so glad that you decided to join us today. And today's program is all about you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It is a pleasure. I think I'm most excited about today's interview because I get to speak with fellow believers. And even if they're not fellow believers, to speak freely um, about being a Christian, a follower of Christ, and sharing my journey through and with God. So I'm excited. Thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah, and so when I was, preparing to have you on today, up until this point, I really haven't like given. I've just shared with everybody to just kind of like share your heart or whatever. But with you, when I was sending stuff your direction, the thought that came to me was, visions always overcome obstacles. Okay,
Mm,
and this doesn't necessarily start like a month before your business started, right? So why
right.
don't you backtrack just a little further, whether it's 5 or 10 years to share with our
Okay.
viewers, because you don't just all of a sudden one day open a business
Right.
unless in your life you learn to
Mm-hmm.
overcome obstacles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So um, I would say um, my vision for being a chef started at a very young age. I was about 4 years old, and my mom would say, even at 4 years old, you would say, Mom, I want to be a chef. I want to be a chef. And so as I became older, where most kids, and I did too, but most kids would watch cartoons on Saturday mornings and be outside playing. I did all of those things. But the TV shows that I loved to watch was like the Food Network channel. So I was incredibly inspired by Chef Emeril Lagasse. And he had this show that, I mean, I was just infatuated with like this live band and music and live studio audience and his signature bam, like I loved the excitement of that, and it really just brought me so much happiness. And I loved watching food shows, and I would study them, and I mean, whether it was Rachel Ray and her 30-minute meals, or I know Paula Deen and her Southern cooking. And so I really fell in love with food at a very, very tender age. And so when I think about visually what I saw as it started to play a role in my journey in life, well, I feel like a lot of us have this experience where we have this thought, we have this idea, and then life just starts happening, right? And so you go to school, and I talked about, going to culinary school. I never went to culinary school. Um, but interesting enough, when I watched all of these amazing chefs, even, Gordon Ramsay, which a lot of people are familiar with as well, um, a lot of these chefs would share about watching their mothers and grandmothers in the kitchen, and so I also had that immediate experience with family and friends and anytime I think of having great memories, it was always around food. And so my love for food really started at a very young age. And so I went through, college and got a degree in human development. And then I worked for the Department of Human Services for Oregon, just short of 6 years, just this past December. And so, in the middle of the pandemic, so this thrust into going into cooking with love really started in the pandemic where we couldn't go anywhere, the most field trip that you had was going to the grocery store. So I have a young son, and he probably at this time was somewhere between 4 and 5, and like our field trip for the day was going to the grocery store. And so
Mm-hmm.
I remember talking to my family and my friends, and they were like, well, why don't you just, film yourself cooking or something? And so my sister would come over. I think we were doing it every Monday night, and we would just use our phones and we would record. And I was just like, okay, I'm going to show people how to do basic foods that you either order out or things that you have at home that you might want to take to the next level. Or maybe you're like, I just don't have a lot of time. I want to put something together quick, simple, but really tasty and good for my family. And I started doing that in the pandemic. And so even then, and I think about it now, I was sharing then, like, oh, I can't wait to do these live cooking demonstrations in front of a studio audience of that nature and be able to serve people. And, I saw it, visually,
Yeah.
I saw it. And so through my journey, even now, I'm starting to learn more and more and more. And it's been an absolutely beautiful journey. I took that leap of faith um, in December, this past December of 2022. I was walking, I do this nature walk, and that's really my time with God, and I pray and I meditate.
Okay.
And that was my time to really say, okay, God, you've shown me people are really enjoying my food. They're reaching out. They want me to cater their events. And I started finding myself, as they say, a rock in a hard place where I had to decide, okay, how much PTO do I have left? How much sick time do I have left? And I had to start deciding. I remember I was watching this preacher, and he made this comment during a like a Bible study that he was doing. He said, um, you've been secretly pursuing purpose. And for me, that
Mm.
sat so heavy because I was secretly taking time off from my 9 to 5 to go cater, or taking a few hours off
Mm.
extra early, and just figuring out, okay, how can I make it work? And I got to a point where I was like, the food was taking over. And I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I remember being on this walk, and I was crying out, and I was like, God, I'm tired. I can't do this anymore. And,
Mm.
you know,
Now let's pause there.
interesting.
Let's pause there for a second,
Yeah,
because this is going to take us a whole nother direction. This is this. No, no, no. This is
I
so
know.
good. This is so good. But we got to bounce back for a second, and let me
Yes, yes, yes,
let me tell.
absolutely.
Okay, let me tell you why. So Dr. Caroline Leaf is a neuropsychologist. Okay, and she
Hmm.
said that the only things that are stored in your mind are memories that were associated with emotions. So I think it's powerful that you shared all of these
Mm,
great memories growing up were encased in good, happy memories, right? And even like okay, let's say for
hmm.
instance, parents, right? Parents with children, if you keep
Yes.
pushing Johnny out there on the football field and Johnny's crying, maybe Johnny's not created to play football, right? But if a child's doing something that excites them and stimulates
Hmm.
their little mind, that's something you want to hone in on, right?
Right.
Right? And now I'm not
Yeah.
saying give him the candy with the
Hmm.
red red FDC dyes and all that, right? That's not what I'm saying, but I feel
Right.
that, and obviously
Hmm.
your mom harnessed that as well, because you didn't just fall in love with cooking unless you had opportunities to cook. So go
Hmm.
back a little and share some of that in your childhood, how your mom, in essence, stewarded this gift that was in her daughter. Because this is going to help parents now with their kids.
Mm. Yeah. You know, I would say that my mom really had instilled in me to, number one, um, have a relationship with God.
Okay.
And not just on Sunday, but really having a relationship with God that's important so that you know his voice.
That's
So
right.
when he gives you that permission, when he gives you the call or that purpose over your life, you have learned to tune out all the other voices that's going on, because naturally, as a lot of us have experienced generationally, you work a job for 30 years, you get your retirement, and that's great and that's wonderful and it worked, but obviously times have changed, society has changed. And so my mom really, pushed and instilled in us having a relationship with God. But also I think it's really important um to insert the fact that um, remembering to worship, not just having the relationship, but continue to have a level of worship in your life on a day-to-day basis. And so, just to share with the viewers, I grew up in church my whole life, and so my parents, my dad's a pastor, and my mom's a first lady, and so um, just through the years, they have always instilled in us, first have a relationship with God, pay your tithes, you know what I mean? Give back to the Lord, because ultimately you just can't beat God's giving, And so I think I've really honed in on, like, there is just absolutely no way I can do this alone. And I've learned again on that conversation of us having about our journey, or my journey is, I have to trust God in this process, because I don't have a clue sometimes what I'm doing. And it's great to have mentors and people that you can seek counsel with. But it becomes difficult when, quite frankly, you're kind of walking this journey alone. We're all walking our journeys alone, even if we have support. And so the support that I do have outside of my parents and my family and spiritual mentors, always reminding me that um, God is my partner, in everything that I do. And so it's so incredibly important. So that for me is what I have taken away from my mom, and just watching her live through that example. And even in recent times, some trials and tribulations that she's endured, even today, and watching her um, go through her journey, and her living through that example, and things that she shared with me that I can apply in my cooking, has, or just in business in general, has been super, super, super helpful. And sometimes I think that, in general, we don't tell people enough, like, how their own journeys help us, help inspire us, and so, and then sometimes people remind me and I go, really? But no, like, even just up until now, from childhood up until now, my mom has just been super supportive. Even now, my mom's like, when I retire, I'm just gonna be like, I'm gonna work for my daughter now. And so it's
Oh.
beautiful to have that level of support. My mom, when I had some of my hardest, challenging, what I like to call those growing pains. You have to go through those growing pains so you know how to correct it, what more you have to add on. if I have to hire more people, if I have to prep, a little bit longer, those growing pains on the business side of cooking and things like that, um, is so important because it's just preparing me for the next level. And so I've been in this space lately of not just having gratitude, but also saying, God, what are you trying to teach me in this moment? What do I need to learn so that I can not only get to the next level for myself, but also look back and say, hey, I went through this. Let me tell you how I got through it. And so,
Yes.
that has been the journey so far. Um, After I've taken this leap. So yeah.
Well, I think that's really inspiring because you decided to do something with your friend in what I would call society lockdown. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, and
Oh, my
instead of,
sister, she was the one recording. Yeah.
yeah, so instead of it being like, you've heard the cliche statements, make lemonade out of lemons, right?
Mhm.
Or
Mhm.
we could go old school and say Pollyanna in the Glad Game, one of the Disney movies forever ago.
Right.
Your mom would know about it, okay? Or just, I grew up in Seattle, and like I kid you not, 11 months out of the year the skies are gray. Okay, so you had to decide.
Yeah.
You had to decide today was going to be a
Yeah.
good day, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So, how would you encourage other people to look back, and say, "Hey, about to take something from their past that they enjoyed and use it to project them in their future?"
Mm.
How would you share wisdom insight?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, I would say look at what, just think back about what was a time or a space in time or a circumstance that you had that you felt like was just really difficult. And again, just reiterating, the pandemic was a really hard time for people. And it was extremely challenging, and we were so, limited. And so, just reminding people to look where we've come. I mean, I remember, when we were in the thick of it, maybe about August of 2020, it felt very dark. It felt very eerie for a lot of people. And I know those who were struggling with depression or had, suicidal thoughts or just felt really low and discouraged during that time. um, just to think back and remind yourself that even though, this is what it felt like, it was temporary. It's always temporary. And so to remind ourselves that when we get to these points, because I have them, even through this journey where you're like, oh, I feel unmotivated. I'm tired. I don't know if I want to do this. I don't feel like it. Our emotions are temporary,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes circumstances are temporary, even when they feel like it's a long time. And I'm saying this,
Mm-hmm.
preaching to myself right now,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
it's like
yeah.
it all is temporary. And then you can look back, because I can look back and go, oh my gosh, I was in a 800 square foot apartment. I turned on my phone and I was like, I'm going to do this. And I'm just going to see where this takes me. And if Brittinie in 2020 could have a conversation, and I'm getting emotional, could have a conversation with Brittinie of 2023, I would just say, girl, keep going. Um, Believe it or not, you're gonna quit your job. You're gonna be super supported. You're going to have events that people come together in love and gather around food and will talk about it for weeks, for months, and look forward to the next one. You're going to become the first African American preferred vendor for the Portland Art Museum. You are going to serve hundreds of people at one time. You're going to as of right now, be 9 months into entrepreneurship and not having to look back at all and wondering, oh, should I have? Has it gotten scary? Yes, girl. It gets a little nerve-wracking sometimes. But God is going to come through for you every single time. You do not serve a God who will fail you. And I can say, and I was just talking to my dad the other day. Um, I was just sharing with him, just kind of going over, finances and always wanting to just make sure, all your other stuff is on point, but just sharing like you've already, and we haven't reached the end of the year, and you've already made what you made in that job before that you left 9 months ago. You've already made that, and you still are making some and still have for, 3.5 months left of the year. And so I think it's beautiful to go back and say, where was I and where am I now? And I think it's so important that I think that sometimes people forget and don't do enough of is having gratitude for what is. Thank you, Lord,
Uh-huh.
for having a roof over my head. Thank you, Lord, for being able
Uh-huh.
to pay these bills because I know we live in really hard times and inflation is up and all of the real life stuff that is happening. And, God continues to show his grace. He continues to show his mercy. And we continue to move glory to glory to glory. And I know, and I say it all the time, like, oh, I'm waiting on something big. I'm expecting something big from God. And I know sometimes that to others who may not be believers, it just sounds like, oh, that's just baloney, whatever.
Uh-huh.
But for me, I'm like, I trust that so deeply, at a real deep, intimate level, because I'm like, I've had dreams. I've had family members who've had dreams and shared dreams about things about me and my business. And I've had some real miracle sign and wonder experiences with God myself. And so if I can encourage anyone, it's just you can look back at the pandemic, you can look at back at that time that you felt like you were going to give up. Wherever you feel like there was a hard time in your life, whatever that looks like, just look back and stop for a second and say, wow, but I made it through and I'm still standing. I'm still here. God is faithful. I can trust him. I can lean on him. I don't have to fear anything. I might get a little nervous. I may be unsure, but it's all right. You can be sure in knowing that God has you. And so that's the best advice I can give anyone out of my own experiences.
That's really good, Brittany. Okay, so three. I like to think of I like to think of the Word of God as irrevocable promises. Okay,
Mm,
because it says, "I am He who was and is to come. I'm the Alpha, the Omega, the beginning and the end. Besides me, there is no other. There is no other God." Right. It also says,
hmm
"Heaven and earth will pass away, but my word shall remain forever,"
Yes,
right? So
absolutely.
if we think of three of these irrevocable promises that you just touched on, one
hmm
is, though we look not on the things which are seen, but the things which are not seen. For the
Right.
things which are seen are temporal, but the things which are not seen are eternal,
Yes.
right? Another promise is, oh gosh, there's three more because now I got to think of this one in there. Um,
Yes, I'm with
well,
you.
one is, there hath not failed one word of all of his great promises. Okay. But another one is, Jesus came that we may have life and have it more
And
abundantly.
more abundantly.
And another one is, now unto him that is able to do exceedingly abundantly above,
Above
right?
all.
Above
Yes.
anything
hmm
we can think or imagine,
Imagine exactly
according to his
his
power
riches and glory. Yeah.
that's at work within you, right? Or the other verse says,
hmm
God is always at work in you to will you according to
Yeah.
his purposes, right?
Yes.
And so I've been thinking about this lately, and that,
hmm
so if there's desires that are in your heart, like, hello, where did the desires come from? right?
come from. They came from the Lord.
Yeah, he created us, right?
Yes.
So think of this.
Mm-hmm.
Think of this down to, like, let's say you're okay. I don't like to go shopping. I like the Lord to find me my stuff, and then I just go out there and pick it up. Okay, and
Mm-hmm.
I call those blessings, or like the Lord hooked me up.
Yeah,
The Lord hooked me up, right?
exactly.
Because He knows our styles. He knows all
Yep.
the intricate details about us. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
but I want to hone in on something you said, which is something that was prevalent during a couple of our years here, and especially in the Pacific Northwest. We were hit really hard over here, okay? And
Mm-hmm.
I want to share
Yeah.
something the Lord shared with me. And I don't even know how He and I were conversing, but He showed me this, and I'm like, "Oh, you've got to be kidding me, Lord." And that's this.
Mm.
Okay, watch this.
Okay.
It says, "Let us create man in our image."
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So another word we can call ourselves is image bearers. Okay? Another
Mm-hmm.
word we can call ourselves is we are a reflected image
Mm-hmm.
of our Father.
Yeah.
Reflect. Okay, now watch this. So if someone is fill in the darkened category, uh, um, I want to be cautious. Um, I want to say darkened negative category of
Mm-hmm.
a potential emotional demeanor.
Yeah.
Okay, that's how I want to word it.
Okay.
So the Lord showed me, I don't like to exalt, I call him little d, okay? Because
Mm-hmm.
my God is large and in charge. But when somebody adopts, I am, and it is attached to one of those darkened negative
Mm-hmm.
demeanors,
Right.
that is the enemy of our very soul trying to
Mm-hmm.
take his image of who
Right.
he is and impress it upon us.
Right.
And my brain was like, "Oh, no, you didn't just show me that, Lord, because that's not who we are."
Exactly. It's not.
That's not who we are. And so when we per se have these feelings, we
Mm-hmm.
don't have to own the feelings
Feeling.
as
Mm-hmm.
that's me.
Right. Right.
So you don't get to be over 21 because you're at least over 21, right? Okay. You don't get to be over 21 without having gone through overcoming certain things like this.
Right.
So you decide how deep you want to go, but
Mm-hmm.
all of this is paramount because you don't just jump into a business without having built character in you.
Right. Right.
So can you, like, you know, get real and just share some of those character defining moments that took place in you where you felt like your flesh was going to fall off, right? But you go as deep or as shallow, whatever you want to do
Mm-hmm.
to get the
Mm-hmm.
point across to viewers.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good one. Well, we know that the flesh is weak. I had a few recent catering events where um, I was dealing with clients where there was just we had set a certain budget and then there was a certain number and then there was a change and then another change and then another adjustment and then can we do this? Can we flip this? Can we do this? And I was ready to blow my top because you're like, well, this is what we established and now it's changing and it was happening in a very short period of time.
Okay.
And so for me, I'm like, I also kind of felt like, are you trusting that I know what I'm doing and I'm doing my job well? That's why you hired me. Or are you trying to micromanage me? That's why I left corporate America to begin with. I
Uh-huh.
wanted to have that freedom to make a decision for myself. And so I was upset. My dad would tell you, I stopped at my parents' house. I'm like, these people, they are getting on my last nerve.
Uh-huh.
I'm like, ah. And and I remember I was like, I need to pray. And one of the things that I have learned
Okay.
is, as the Bible says, be angry but sin not. It is so important to take a breather. A lot of times we want to respond. We can be so right in what we're feeling. Because I had a right to be frustrated. Um, but I represent cooking with love. You know what I'm saying? My face is plastered everywhere. And so I had to be like, again, that moment where it's like, Lord, what are you trying to teach me in this moment? Because a lot of times I'm learning more about myself and sometimes the people I'm working with.
Ah.
And also learning how to navigate when there's, difficulty or and things like that. And so I had to take a beat, as they say. I was like, I had gotten an email. I think it was like on a Friday. How people love to send an email at 4:30 on a Friday because they really ain't expecting you to respond. And so I was like, I read the email and I was like, okay, I'm like, oh. And in that moment, I said, I cannot answer this. I'm
Uh-huh.
not going to answer this because I had to get my mind right. I had to get my spirit right.
Uh-huh.
And I had to get my
Uh-huh.
mind right because one, I'm like, I want to be a good representation of God because again, and then also I don't know who who's attached to who knows
Uh-huh.
who. And
Yes,
I don't ever want
yes.
to present myself in a way that can hurt me in the long run. So there's also that business professional state of mind that I have to think about, but also character wise. Like, I don't want anybody to be like, oh, she's a believer, but she was cussing everybody out, you know?
Yeah,
And so I
yeah,
want to make
yeah.
sure that I pull it back and like, okay, I am not spiritually in the place that I can respond right now. So let me take a beat. So honestly, what I ended up doing was, my mom had got some really great news that she shared with my sister and I. And I said, you know what? Let's go down to Salem. Let's go to the Oregon State Fair. Let's go have some fun. Let's let our hair down. We were there for like 6 or 7 hours.
Yeah.
And we had such a great time. And I really needed that, and that rest and be able to go to church on Sunday and get a good word and pray. I mean, and I know sometimes people are like, dang, you need all that prayer. Well, I mean, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. You know what I mean? I'm like, so I had to work through that frustration because it's so easy to respond, and sometimes it's not the other people on the other side. It's sometimes the Lord is saying, okay, what you need to work on something for yourself, and right now is not a good time to respond. And so that was a character build for me. Was okay, you're frustrated and that's okay. I tell my son this all the time. It's okay to be angry. I think sometimes we get this idea that because the Bible says be angry and sin not, that somehow it attaches to that, oh, you can't be angry. No, you can be angry. It's what you do with that anger is what's most important. And so for me, I'm like, I'm going to get frustrated. I'm going to deal with, clients and some of the things that they may have, and not even just clients, just day to day life and interpersonal relationships, but just taking a beat and saying, okay, how do I handle this? How do I respond? And do my best to communicate effectively, but also be sure that I'm communicating my frustration. And then I did. And I, after I took that breather and took some time to myself and cool down, as they say, I was able to still share my frustrations. Um, but I didn't have to feel like, oh, I shouldn't have said that or I shouldn't have responded that way. I still was able to effectively communicate what was frustrating me in a way that ended up being received very well and
Mm.
understood and empathized with me. And then I was able to move forward to successfully do what it was that I love to do, and that was to prepare an amazing, event for this client. And of course, that's just one. scenario. But it was one that really challenged my character. You know what I mean? It really challenged me
Yeah.
because, and it also forced me on the back end to consider what are ways that I can tweak how I do my contracts. Maybe I need to add an addendum about how to do things. And so, in that time, in that space that I took a breather, I received some good advice from people who've done business a lot and was like, hey, how about you consider this and add this into your contract? So that way you can avoid those issues, and you don't have to deal with those kind of problems moving forward in the future if that's to happen, because every situation is going to be different, every client is going to be different. And again, I don't want to be in a habit of saying them, they, these
Uh-huh.
people, these clients, when a lot of times it's God doing a work in me. And
Mm.
saying, if you want to get to the next level, there's going to be some things that you have to work on. And
Mm.
so, yeah,
Mm.
that's what I would say that I could share.
So
I
she
mean, I'm telling
doesn't.
you, I'm keeping it all the way real.
Yes, you are. But let me tell you what I'm seeing, and this is like, wow, this is what I'm seeing. I
Yeah,
physically have in front of me or on screen Brittany Love,
yeah.
but I don't just have Brittany, because I've got Brittany's dad. I've got Brittany's mom. I've got
Mm-hmm.
I've got Father, Son, Holy Spirit. I've got
Yeah,
any of the other people. I see
yeah.
you as a an open vessel
Mm-hmm.
who has been a student her whole life
Yeah.
and has allowed other people not to lead her but to influence her. You're a leader,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
you're a very humble leader.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate
And
that.
no, and so what you are just screaming the value. Blessed is the counsel of multitude,
Mm.
because you have just given credit to all these other people in a very short period of time, and that is bravery, boldness, humility, honorable, and influence. You're an influencer. You will be
Thank
an
you. Thank
influencer
you.
in teaching others to receive.
Mm-hmm.
I just, wow. That it is
Thank you.
it's
No, I appreciate you saying that because, in these moments that I learned that and I engage with other people that I partner with or that I team with, and things like that come up for them, I'm like that nudge, like, okay, I know you're upset, but listen, relax, be nice. You know what I mean? Like, because again, I'm like, we're constantly a representation of Christ, whether if we want to be or not. And I'm not always in spaces, unlike this one, where I can freely talk about God and I'll talk about him regardless. I don't care. But as I said, there's a time and a place for everything. And there'll be those times where I feel like the spirit is like, now is that time. But while I'm in the hustle and bustle of things, it's not always that, reality for me. But I tell my teammates all the time, and I'm like, sometimes I'll be like, dang, why did I even say that? But I tell them, like, let me bump my head, scratch my knee, make some of those mistakes, early figuring it all out. So when you share those experiences with me, I can say, I had a similar experience. Here's how I handled it. Take what you want with that. Um, and hopefully, it helps and works out, because I want everyone around me to be successful, not just in their business, but ultimately trying to make sure that everything that they do and everything that you do acknowledge, God in all of it, because ultimately, he's the one that's allowing these things, to happen. Like, we can talk about, faith without works is dead. Oh, I put in the work, but 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 it's believing, truly believing without seeing. And I say this all the time when I have conversations with some of my really good friends and business partners, and I'm like, I know sometimes that for some people it could annoy them, or I'm like, or I can sound crazy, or it'd be like, oh Lord, she done said that so many times, but I'm like, I'm gonna keep saying it until it comes into full fruition. You know what I mean? Until I look at you and go, didn't I say? I told you. You know what I mean? I told you. I told you. You know, and be able to celebrate with them as well. And so, yeah, that is just. I mean, it's a compliment. I appreciate what you're saying. It's a compliment because I feel like in this last 9 months, I have had I have had to, not that I hadn't before, but I have had to draw so much closer to God in this leap of faith. Because I tell people all the time, oh, it's easy to say that you have faith when you know that your check is coming on the first of the month. It's a lot different when you're like, I have no idea when the next check is coming. I don't
Uh-huh.
have a clue. You know, it could be
Uh-huh.
tomorrow, it could be next week, it could be next month, and all of those things. And it's always like where I'm like, I'm not gonna stress about. I'm not gonna try nothing. And even in times where I'm like, I should be resting. Um, and then it's like all of a sudden I'm like, I wasn't getting any emails, and now my emails are, flooding, and I've gotten to a place where I'm like, okay, I can start to pick what I want to do. One, because I don't want to burn out, you
Uh-huh.
know,
Uh-huh.
and I want to make sure that I rest because I'm also a mother, you know what I mean? And
Yes.
so I walked away from corporate America so that I could be more active and, involved in my son's life and his, extra activities outside of school and things like that, where, I couldn't do that. I had to show up somewhere Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and by the time you get home, you're tired, it's dinner, it's bedtime, that same
Yeah.
routine. And I empathize for so many people who do that, still do that. Um, but ultimately, at the end of the day, I was just like, no, I want more for myself, and um and I expect more. And I think we
Uh-huh.
have to get to a point where if we, like we were, you were saying earlier, if we're trusting and believing that God can do exceedingly abundantly above all we could ask, think, or imagine, I'm like, it's so easy for us as believers to freely say those scriptures, but a lot of times we don't actually take action in what that really looks like. And I was just like, okay, I'm gonna really trust God. And I'll tell you, I was crying when I was crying happy tears, but I was crying because I was um going on this journey. I'm like, I didn't have an idea. I didn't have a clue. All I knew was that I got the confirmations that I really needed to take this walk, for this idea, this vision that I had. I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna walk this journey, even if I'm walking it by myself, but I'm never by myself. I'm never alone. I have an incredible support system around me that I'm sure is praying and just like, Lord, overflow. know? um, but I need those people in my corner, more than I think they even realize, because um, it's really it's really different when you're like, okay, I don't know what's coming next, how it's gonna happen. And so far, even in some times where I was just like, okay, God, I know I didn't ask and pray this probably about 10 times already, but I'm asking again. um, but just being able to just really grow my relationship. I mean, this entrepreneurship has really put me in a space to really just be like, I'm just gonna trust you. I don't have a clue. I don't have a handbook. I can YouTube. I can reach out to resources. But my spiritual mentor, she's always like, God is your partner, and that's all you need. That's all you need. You don't
Uh-huh.
need anybody else. All you need is God, and seek Him. You say, God, this is what I need, and He's going to do it. And
Uh-huh.
so, Just having such an amazing support system, church family. For me, it's like you can, if you cheer me on, that it means the world for me. Of course, it's like, yes, hire me, of course, but the support, that's what keeps me going. People feeling like, man, how did you do that? I mean, I had another, really good friend of mine, partner, who was like, she asked me, this is probably a few weeks ago. She literally was like, so how did you decide? Like, what made you decide? How did you decide to just leave? Like, how did you know you were ready? And I had to tell her, I said, you know what? It's only something that you and God are going to
That's
know. That's
right.
only a
That's right.
conversation that you and God can have.
That's right.
I knew, God knew exactly what I needed to hear, what I needed to see, who it had to come from in order, and what space I had to be in. I had to be in that space of, I'm done. I can't do this no more. And finally say, okay, because that's what I was going to say earlier. Sometimes the way that we activate our faith is, God, if you do this, then I'll do this, right? Like, God, if
Uh,
you get me this contract that makes the same amount of money that I make here, then I'll leave my job, because now I'm like, okay, I can secure myself. But if God is like, no, that's not how this works.
uh-huh.
You're going to trust me when you don't know where it's coming from, and then you will see my works, but
Mm,
a lot of times we are like, okay, my faith is conditional. God, if you do this, then I'll do this. And God's like, no, that's not how faith works, sweetheart. No.
mm-hmm.
And so I had to learn that. And I feel like as I progress in this journey, it's been that every time. It's like I get to this point where I'm like, okay, Lord, I need this amount of money for this, and I have to pay for this, and I have to handle this, and I have to do that. And I'm like, okay, Lord, you see what it is. One of the things that I've been praying for is, getting my own cargo van and not having to rent some, commercial spaces. So that has been, a prayer. So I'm like, I'm going to share that here, because I'm
That's
like,
right.
I, don't know who can be connected or knows any information where I'm like, hey, I don't want to have to keep renting spaces or renting vans. I'm like, I want for myself, for my own. And so that's been a prayer that I know that can help and expand, my business. And so, just keep coming to these places where I'm like, okay, here's another step of, faith. And I want to be careful with, understanding risk in faith, because faith is believing. I'm like, but a risk is also one of those things where people can feel like, oh, it's taking a risk. Well, in business, yes, you will take risk. But for me, I'm like, I'm not going to I still have to, God still gives us, common sense and ways to be business savvy, to make good financial decisions. So I'm like, doesn't mean that God is not going to carry you. He's not going to help you out. He's not going to rescue you, but he's still going to be like, hold on, are you going to trust me for this? Are you going to trust that it's going to happen in the right time, and you not just rush out and do something because yet again, you weren't willing to trust me and wait? And so I've been trying to learn how to just be like, okay, I've already made my request known. So, and God's already revealed to me that these things are going to happen. So I'm just going to wait
Uh-huh.
until I know without knowing, that moment when I knew without any doubt and with all the confirmations in the world that it was time for me to leave. So even in the things that I need to better my business, to make it more efficient, I'm still like, no, the Lord's gonna take care of it. So yeah.
No, that's and it's really wise too. Um, it's to me, because it's carriers of wisdom, is Sagion.
Yeah.
It's wise to, um, um, oh, it's almost like you're looking at a structure. Okay,
Hmm.
so you're looking at, is this wall solid over here? Is this wall solid over here?
Right.
Is this solid over here? Is this solid over here? Is the ground level stable? Right?
Hmm.
Because
Hmm.
truth be told, right? People need good employers. Not everybody has a desire to be a business owner, right?
Right,
But
right.
people need good employers, right?
Mm-hmm.
People desire to be around a positive work atmosphere, right?
Absolutely.
And so
Mm-hmm.
other people, you're not going to have somebody come work for you that, oh my gosh, I hate cooking. That is not the way. That
Right, right. Right.
you're
No,
you're
for
you're
real.
yeah, you're not going to have people come work for you that, oh my gosh, I just need a job. No, you're going to have
Right.
people. You're going to actually probably have. It could potentially be on a subconscious level. Students,
Mm,
students
mm.
come and work for you, but
Yes.
not just students in the cooking world, but students in the real live world, right?
Oh yeah,
Um,
I have a family member, she has a mentorship program here in Portland. And it's called Triple Threat Mentoring. It's ran by Nike Green. She has a amazing program in which like they do like work development skills. They do community service. They do a lot of really amazing things, and it's all for young
she
girls
wrote a
between
book,
the
right?
ages of like middle school and high school.
Did she write a book?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
because I saw something on her within the last 6 months, and I was like, "Oh, Sean, you need to reach out and interview her."
Yeah,
And
that's
then,
my aunt actually.
oh my, well,
Yeah.
look
And
at
so I've
that.
reached out to her. That's just like another resource where, like you were saying, with students, all of them are students. And so we've been talking about how can I have Cooking with Love connect with your mentorship program where we can teach these young ladies, work development skills in the hospitality and food service industry, whether if they like it or not, they get to have that experience and find out and learn the ins and out of what it's like. And I just think about the fact that we've all seen those stories and articles about how people have had horrible customer service experience. So for me, I'm like, you can come over here and we're going to show you what it looks like to show people that they can have a great experience with food, maybe on the catering side, maybe not necessarily on the restaurant, but still be able to know what that looks like, because showing that you have good customer service skills can also help build your character in the real world. How do you engage? How do you communicate with people that you don't know, that are complete strangers? And I think people miss the importance and how valuable it is um, for servanthood, especially, we can talk about just in the kingdom, but having a level of servanthood, you have to have a desire to want to serve people, number one.
Uh-huh.
But I think they underestimate how fulfilling you get when you serve others, and being able to get that, like, oh, we had such a wonderful time, or the food was great. For me, I absorb that so much because I mean, my team will tell you, some like everything will be set out. It's beautiful. It's all nice, and I'm in the back like, is there enough food? How does everything? Because I'm just like, I know it's gonna be great, but I'm just like, I'm hoping and praying that they just have an absolutely amazing time. And my team's like, Brittany, it's fine, it's great. You know this. You've done this a dozen more times. But that's just where my heart is. And so I'm
because
even working now on creating behind the scenes so people can really see what it's like, you know, doing this kind of work.
that would be amazing to have those video clips too, right?
Yes.
How do you cater? How does the behind the scenes? But you're gonna have to come up with a sassy saying, okay?
Oh, I know.
Right, because cooking with love, that's sweet, right? And so
Yes.
you want to find something that you can use behind the scenes that is catchy, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
catch a glimpse of love in action, right? Whatever.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, the
Yes.
Lord will download it to you.
Yes.
But another thing you touched on too is like you're not wanting it to be, the spread to be laid out to like for yourself to do a ding, but
Right.
because you want it to be a blessing to who it's being
Yes.
laid out for.
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
Well, I'm so glad that you were able to come on with us today. And
Oh, me too.
yeah, and so for all of our viewers, in the about comments, you will see all the contact information, how to reach
Yep.
out to Cooking with Love. And
Yes.
I'm excited to connect with you, but I'm also excited to connect that because in the back of my mind was, oh wow, I
Hmm.
want to interview that woman, and now she's your aunt.
Yep.
That's
I'm
wild.
telling you, it's a small world. Yes. No,
That's so
she's amazing.
yeah.
She's absolutely amazing. You will love her.
Yeah. So thank you so much for coming on. And I want to thank all of our viewers for coming on this episode of
Yeah.
Sagionic 1027. And until our next episode, may the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon thee always. Blessings. Bye.
Bye.